looking at the newer information that can be found in nutrition journals, and I find that when women come in taking prenatal vitamins, they continue to have numerous vitamin deficiencies despite those vitamins. So a couple things with them. The first of which is many of them have a lot of fillers in them and make them very difficult to absorb. And so we're not sure if it's simply that mom is not getting the benefit of the vitamin because it's not as absorbable. And also there's some question as to whether the 100% recommended daily allowances are adequate for today's needs with, increased stress, increased demands of 21st century America. So we often see when we test women for nutrients on prenatal vitamins that they continue to have a lot of deficits. And so we tend to change them to regular vitamins, which are customized to their personal needs. And we keep them on those vitamins throughout their pregnancy so that we are more reasonably assured that they're getting what they need throughout the pregnancy. And that will likely trickle down to the baby and provide the baby with more nourishment as well.
So are you saying that each one is different, like there's a B complex, a vitamin E, vitamin A, so that's what you prescribe for your patients?
We use certain brands that I've looked into that are studied, that we know are safe, that have very few fillers, that are what we call bioavailable. They get absorbed and they get into the cells. And then what we do is after we've tested, we give each woman a base vitamin that best covers her requirements, and then we add whatever might be necessary in addition. It's extremely rare that we just prescribe a routine multiple vitamin that satisfies most people's needs. We usually need to add additional things like extra B12, perhaps an extra B complex. We may need to add antioxidants to their regimen because they're deficient in antioxidants. So everyone is completely different. One woman might be deficient in CoQ10 while another one is deficient in lipoic acid. Those are commonly not found in prenatal vitamins, but if you're deficient, you need it. Those are critically important for all body function, one of which is pregnancy. So we fill in the blanks in whichever way we need to fill in with the safest products that we can find on the market. And then we test afterwards. We test again in 6 to 9 months to make sure that we are covering those deficits and those levels are in fact improved.
That's great. Thank you so much for really treating the whole person and getting into the individual, because as you've said, each person is different and has different needs. So thank you so much for answering that question.
Yes, thank you. My pleasure. Thank you for asking.
You're welcome. And I'll let you go for other callers to dial in.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Malin.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye now. All right. Yes, that was wonderful. Thank you, Deborah. Appreciate it. So, yes, just getting back to our food. So it's a known fact that our food quality is not quite there anymore. Our mineral content is down, depending on the study that you look at, from 30 up to 70%. So it's known that nutrient levels in many foods have declined. Given rapid farming, pesticides, these all contribute to stripping our food of nutrients. So as we alluded to with the last question, prenatal vitamins and other vitamins based on testing can help fill these gaps. Stress also consumes nutrients. That's another factor to consider. We are experiencing unprecedented stress, unfortunately, especially here in the United States. We experience lack of sleep, excessive activities, psychological stressors, physical stressors. These all consume our nutrients. So this can lead to malnourishment as well, and our detoxification systems, if they are malnourished, will not work, and this will lead to toxins getting through mom and to baby, where they'll stay, because the baby's liver is not sufficiently developed to defend it. In fact, when children are born, most of their critical systems are underdeveloped because they're so tiny. Their gastrointestinal system is underdeveloped, the brain, the liver. These are all still developing after birth. So babies born with these underdeveloped systems having to deal with up to 300 chemicals, 180 of which are known to cause cancer, that's just a prescription for potential disaster if we don't intervene. We can see how this baby then grows into a toddler that's catching colds frequently, having ear infections, missing school, potentially being exposed to antibiotics, which weaken the immune system even more. We can see how this might lead to needing to have tonsils removed, tubes in the ears. None of this is uncommon. And if we carry it forward, we can see how this can lead to attention deficit disorders and autism and childhood cancers. So although these studies have not been performed, you can really just connect the dots from the data that is known to really lay blame where it should be blamed, which is in these exposures that our children are experiencing. So if we look at autism as an example, it was unheard of 200 years ago. You can't go back in history books and find a reference to a disorder that sounds like autism until the Industrial Revolution. Cancer, on the other hand, you can read about in history books going back thousands of years. Cancer is not a new disease, but autism is. After the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, we see the first reports of a condition that sounds like autism in 19th century England. Autism was astoundingly rare, affecting 1 in 10,000 children. Here in the United States, the rate of autism has now skyrocketed to 1 in 65 over the past 30 years alone. I've heard some reports that this is because we're diagnosing autism better. I challenge that. I don't think so. Again, we don't find references to brain disorders or behavioral disorders or developmental disorders that would sound like autism prior to the dawn of the Industrial Revolution. So this isn't a matter of we just know how to diagnose autism better. This is a matter of we have too many toxins in our environment. So can these same cancer-causing toxins identified by the Environmental Working Group also cause autism and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder? You bet. Is it a coincidence that 1 out of every 2 children is expected to have at least one disease by age 18? I don't believe in coincidences. And in this case, I would recommend you not either. And I know Dream Vision 7 radio listeners do not believe in coincidences. Everything has a purpose. So as we begin to ask how the richest country on the planet can have the sickest kids on the planet, we can look a little deeper and see what we can do. So within the field of integrative medicine, there is a lot that we can do. And this is not isolated to mothers who are considering getting pregnant. We can take this approach at any point in time, even after birth, even after a condition has been diagnosed. We can still apply these same principles of integrative medicine to help make the condition better or perhaps reverse the condition. Ideally, we would like to prevent the condition in any way that we possibly can. So in integrative medicine, we can easily test for toxins. We can test the mom and see just how many toxins she's been exposed to. We can test for heavy metals. We can test for phthalates. We can test for all of the nasty chemicals I talked about in our first segment. And we can test for how the liver is doing in detoxifying these chemicals. We can do these advanced liver tests to find out where within liver detoxification functions, where the snags are and where these toxins are building up and what nutrients that we need to provide to the mom to help her better detoxify her body so that the womb is nice and healthy for a developing baby. We can also test for gastrointestinal disorders. So in the presence of heartburn or nausea or constipation, loose stools, or bloating, we can do testing and we can identify small bowel infections. This is done through a breath test. A breath test is considered the gold standard by Cleveland Clinic and Johns Hopkins University. Their studies were based on breath testing for methane and hydrogen gases. The idea here is that bacteria that are in the small intestine that don't belong there emit gases. These gases are methane and hydrogen. And the small intestine is considered to be a place that is supposed to be relatively bacteria-free. So it's supposed to be fairly sterile. So the presence of bacteria in sufficient amounts would lead to sufficient amounts of hydrogen and methane gases in your breath. And when you blow into a tube after drinking a sugar solution at timed intervals, we can follow this sugar down and through the small intestine. And what you do is you breathe into the tube every 20 to 30 minutes. And those gases are then measured at a lab. And then this infection can be diagnosed fairly easily. The testing's not perfect. There can be false positives and false negatives, so it's important to have the entire clinical scenario and someone who is skilled in proper interpretation, because sometimes the test result will come back negative and we still very highly suspect that infection is present due to other corroborating information. Sometimes it comes back positive and we suspect that the infection has been cleared. So it's important to know how to interpret the test results, but these tests are available. Again, Johns Hopkins back in 2014 studied small bowel infections, and other studies have shown that up to 70% of children and adults who present to a gastroenterologist's office would be found to have small bowel infections if they were tested. So that's 7 out of every 10 people, which is an astounding number. And small bowel infections cause significant malabsorption. You can become very rapidly malnourished with the presence of this infection. I experienced this infection firsthand a couple of years ago, and I rapidly had 13 different vitamin deficiencies that I hadn't had before. So it's a very critical place. The small bowel is the hub of the body. It's where all nutrition comes into the body. And if you have an infection and inflammation there, it's very easy to see how you can suddenly develop numerous vitamin deficiencies and accumulate a lot of toxicity and inflammation as a result of that. So very easily diagnosed, not as easily treated. So again, you need to be in the care of a board-certified integrative medical doctor to have this condition properly treated for you. Johns Hopkins showed in that same study of 2014 that antibiotics were not as good as herbal therapies for the treatment of SIBO, which was not surprising, but I was very happy to see this study because it does show and validate a lot of what we do in integrative medicine, and it's being recognized in our conventional medical model, at least among the best institutions such as Johns Hopkins. So SIBO is another important thing. If you want to prevent childhood diseases, if you have any gastrointestinal symptoms whatsoever, I strongly encourage you to be tested for SIBO and malabsorption and nutrient deficits. That's another thing that can be easily diagnosed. And when we come back after this commercial break, we will talk about diagnosing nutrient deficits and properly treating them, and then we'll go into 3 tips for your prenatal optimization and what you can do to make sure your baby has the best possible outcome at birth. We'll be right back. Please give us a call at 833-220-1200. I'd love to hear from you with more questions and comments right here on Dream Vision 7 Radio. We'll be right back.
What happens when we begin to realize that the 200-year experiment we've called the American healthcare system has failed? Learn how spirituality, ancient traditions, and cutting-edge science are merging to create a new paradigm of wellness on Awakened Wellness with Milen Rio.